Imagine tuning in one Thursday night in 1994 and seeing Pam Grier appear on your favorite sitcom, effortlessly stealing every frame she graced. But what seemed like a routine guest spot on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air would soon become one of Hollywood's juiciest urban legends. Rumors spread that after a mysterious on-set clash, she was banned from ever returning to the Banks mansion again. The viewers scratched their heads and speculated what could possibly have happened behind the scenes to merit such a drastic move. But the truth, as you're about to discover, is far more complex and far more revealing about the cutthroat politics of 90s television. Welcome to our deep dive into the untold story of how Hollywood's original queen of action ended up on the outside looking in, when all she wanted was a chance to make Prince Carlton look tough. This isn't just another celebrity rumor mill. This is a saga filled with broken promises, power struggles, and one unforgettable confrontation that would change careers overnight. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind to the peak of Pam Grier's career, when her name alone sold tickets, and no one questioned her status as a cultural icon. It's the mid-1970s, and Grier has already conquered the silver screen with blistering performances in Foxy Brown and Coffee. Her name is synonymous with power, elegance, and a fearless attitude that redefined what female leads could achieve on screen. Studios lined up, offering her blockbuster budgets, while fans painted her face on protest signs and action figures. But by the dawn of the next decade, Grier had begun to shift gears, seeking roles that showcased her surprising comedic timing just as much as her adrenaline-charged fight scenes. The industry was different back then, genre lines were blurring, and sitcoms like Fresh Prince were hungry for guests who could bring instant star power. When producers first approached Grier's team, excitement buzzed through the corridors of NBC. This was the celebrity drop in that would guarantee headlines. Grier herself was intrigued by the idea of poking fun at her tough persona, of playing against type in front of a TV audience that had come to adore her as an action heroine. Scripts arrived, promising a one-off episode full of laughs, a photograph with Will Smith's character, and a final scene where Carlton Banks would be schooled in the art of cool. But as rehearsals began on the soundstage, what seemed like harmless fun soon spiraled into a high-stakes power play between Grier and the show's writing team. Pages were rewritten on the fly, jokes were tossed aside, and tempers flared when Grier refused to deliver a punchline she felt betrayed her hard-earned legacy. The conflict reached its peak on a rainy afternoon when the scene meant to cement the episode's feel. Good ending was suddenly torn apart by a single line change. Grier, ever the professional, pressed on. But insiders say she delivered that line coldly, allowing the network execs to taste the first hint of rebellion. By the time cameras rolled later that evening, the atmosphere was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the laughter and applause the crew had expected. Off-script, stories circulated of Grier confronting producers, demanding respect, and insisting the episode honor her cinematic reputation. Fear gripped the network. What if this legendary figure, this icon of strength, turned her back on the show entirely? And so, in a decision as swift as it was shocking, the higher-ups voted to ensure that Grier would never grace that set again. What followed was a masterclass in damage control, with network PR teams spinning the story into a minor scheduling conflict. Officially, Grier was unavailable, busy with a film commitment that conveniently overlapped her slated air date. Fans accepted the canned explanation. Few dared to question the network's carefully crafted narrative. But behind closed doors, Grier's camp seethed, feeling betrayed by an industry that had once celebrated her groundbreaking roles. Contacted for comment, Grier simply smiled and said she was focusing on her next project, leaving the rumor mill to fill in the blanks. Yet over the years, bits of the truth have trickled out in interviews, hinting at the real clash that drove a wedge between Pam and the fresh-faced Banks family. Sources close to the production reveal it all started with a wardrobe decision. Pam insisted on a custom leather jacket that the wardrobe department claimed was too expensive. Rather than compromise on quality, she stormed off set, demanding her stylist be replaced and her creative input honored. The wardrobe lead alleged she was uncooperative. The producers whispered that she was becoming difficult. And just like that, a once sealed deal was severed. It remained hidden. Suddenly the network was scrambling. NBC's Inner Circle convened emergency meetings in their glass-clad offices to figure out how to address the backlash that threatened to overshadow their hit sitcom. They hastily drafted memos insisting that Pam Grier's absence had nothing to do with on-set drama, attributing it instead to a scheduling conflict with a film commitment. Publicity posters were quietly reprinted, episodes were reedited to remove any hint of tension, and a friendly soundbite from Will Smith was circulated. Pam was amazing. We just had to move things around. Yet behind the polished claims, insiders knew the truth. The powers that be had been frightened by a single moment of defiance. It wasn't just the jacket. Studio executives had long viewed Grier's unflinching attitude as an asset in action flicks, but struggled to accommodate it in a comedic format built on jokes at her expense. The bullet-proof heroine of Coffee and Foxy Brown refused to be cast as mere punchline fuel. When the writers swapped her witty comebacks for slapstick humiliation, Grier spoke up. She argued that Carlton's transformation into a badass should emerge through clever banter, not a hastily stapled, together montage of him trying on her trademark leather gloves. That show of creative ownership was more revolutionary than any stunt she'd pulled with real razor blades hidden in her hair back in the 70s. And it was precisely the kind of moment that made network executives jittery, contrasting the polished on-air persona with the raw reality off-camera reveals a clash emblematic of Hollywood's uneasy relationship with strong women. Pam Grier had built her career fighting back against every stereotype, from the pimp runs of Coffee to the underground gladiatorial chariots of Foxy Brown. She had performed risky stunts, broken box office records, and wowed audiences with her no-compromise stunts. Yet the same industry that celebrated her as a trailblazer balked when she insisted on scripting integrity. It underscores an uncomfortable truth. Even as the 90s sitcom boom pushed boundaries, it still relied on pushing icons into boxes they didn't fit. For Grier, the fallout was personal. Friends report she felt betrayed by colleagues she'd admired, by executives who claimed to champion diversity yet penalized her for demanding respect. Even her agent, who had sealed the original deal, took calls from network brass insisting they keep Grier in line, an instruction he flatly refused. In interviews years later, Pam would describe that period as one of the toughest of her life, a time when she questioned whether Hollywood still had a place for her brand of fearless authenticity. The thought of returning to Bel-Air became a painful reminder that in Tinseltown, talent could be collateral damage in a culture war fought on soundstages. Behind the scenes, colored lenses and blown-out spotlights concealed a more subtle tactic: coercive kindness. Producers sent Grier bouquets of flowers, handwritten notes expressing admiration for her legacy, and exclusive scripts for potential future cameo roles. All of it was sweet packaging designed to soften the edges of a punitive message: know your place or else. But Grier wasn't buying it. She returned the flowers, archived the notes, and continued her work on a gritty independent drama that careened into arthouse success. Without the sitcom paycheck, she took pay cuts on purpose, leaning into roles that allowed her full creative control, producing, directing, and writing projects she could shape from the ground up. Meanwhile, fans who remembered that lone Fresh Prince episode circulated fan-made edits online, isolating Grier's best lines and framing her as the one star who refused to shrink. A cult following grew, fueled by internet forums and late-night cable reruns. Conspiracy theories blossomed. Some claimed NBC was secretly in bed with a rival studio. Others said Grier's jacket had been designed by an upstart fashion house that the network felt threatened by. Even now, social media threads continue to relitigate that 1994 clash as if it were a battleground in a modern revolution for creative autonomy. Despite the absence of any official statement, Grier's camp never considered pursuing legal action. Publicly suing a major network could have branded her difficult in ways that overshadowed decades of cinematic triumphs. Instead, she channeled her frustration into her craft. By the late 90s, she was collaborating with Quentin Tarantino, not because she needed the paycheck, but because he respected her input, rewriting Jackie Brown's dialogue around her instincts. It was a vindication of sorts, a reminder that when she refused to play small, the world changed instead of her. The real irony is that the Banks family ended up inadvertently benefiting from Grier's defiance. Carlton Banks's character arc evolved in her absence. Writers transformed him from a clueless parodist of cool into a more self-aware, well-rounded young man. They credited that growth to lessons he'd supposedly learned in his single scene with Grier's character, turning her brief appearance into the stuff of legend. In a twist only Tinseltown could engineer, her no-show became a catalyst for narrative depth, proving that sometimes the greatest impact comes from the most unlikely sparks. And so the story of Pam Grier's one and only Fresh Prince cameo endures as both cautionary tale and emblem of creative courage. It reminds us that even established legends can face exile when they prioritize integrity over easy laughs. It reminds us that the sitcom landscape, bright, fast, and gleaming, has room for only so much rebellion. And it reminds us of the cost borne not by those who conform, but by those who dare to say no. Ever since Pam Grier's eyebrow-raising exit from the Bel-Air set, the legend of what really transpired has taken on a life of its own, spawning think pieces, late-night monologues, and interviews with crew members who claim they almost spilled the beans. But beyond the gossip, the core of this saga taps into something far richer: the struggle for respect and creative ownership in an industry that often trades authenticity for mass appeal. In the years that followed, Pam's decision not to reprise that guest spot became a touchstone for conversations about how strong women navigate power dynamics in comedy, drama, and every genre in between. Production insiders recall that the Fresh Prince writers' room buzzed with a mix of admiration and anxiety. On the one hand, Grier's intensity elevated the material. Writing staff would later admit that lines they'd composed felt dull next to her mere presence. On the other hand, her assertiveness exposed the limitations of a format built on caricature, punchlines, and laugh tracks. It wasn't a simple case of diva demands. It was a creative reckoning. Television in the mid-1990s was booming, but few shows dared to embrace improvisation or actor-led rewrites, especially when it came to comedy. Grier's insistence on narrative integrity, even in a half-hour sitcom, challenged the status quo. In private interviews, several cast members have praised her influence. One episode director described Grier's performance as a clinic in timing. She knew exactly when to hold a beat, how to tilt her head, and when not to deliver the punchline at all, letting the humor emerge organically. But such moments came at the cost of production delays and on-set friction. Crew schedules tightened, budgets crept upward, and network schedulers faced a frantic scramble to keep the show on track. The extent to which Grier's presence strained the machine became the unspoken rationale for her blacklisting. Despite this, her single Fresh Prince outing cemented her influence on Carlton Banks's character trajectory. After her departure, writers expanded Carlton's storyline, weaving in lessons about authenticity, self-respect, and finding one's voice, undeniably echoing the very principles Grier championed. Her brief arc evolved into a legend that pep rally speeches and T-shirts seized upon. Carlton learned it from Pam. Entire fan communities coalesced around that idea, heralding it as a moment of tectonic shift in the show's ethos. A cameo that never happened proved more potent than most recurring roles. Beyond scripted television, her bold stand reverberated through the industry. Aspiring actresses and writers began citing the Bel-Air incident as a source of inspiration. Panel discussions at film festivals turned humming debates into declarations. Never compromise your voice for a clickbait cameo. Read oneself, published Zine. Talent agents reported an uptick in clients demanding co-writing credits and script approval. It was a subtle revolution, rolling out across smaller networks and independent productions. If Pam could stand her ground on the biggest stage of 90s sitcom fame, why couldn't today's performers do the same? At the same time, critics argued that the whole narrative was overblown. Some columnists called the blacklisting theory Hollywood folklore, pointing to Grier's packed schedule of film roles as proof she hadn't been damaged by the snub. In a way, those skeptics missed the point. The Bel-Air controversy wasn't about career derailment. It was about a choice, choosing artistic integrity over guaranteed prime time exposure. An emblematic fork in the road, it revealed the crossroads facing any actor who dares to speak up. The modern streaming era has only deepened that conversation. Today's platforms trumpet creative freedom and collaborative environments, but echoes of the Bel-Air wardrobe clash persist. Behind the scenes tweets and anonymous forum posts routinely showcase friction between talent and production hierarchies. Whenever a star challenges a showrunner, the specter of Pam Grier's lone Fresh Prince episode inevitably surfaces as both caution and rallying cry. It stands as a milestone in TV lore, a reminder that power balances shift when someone insists on creative respect. Interestingly, the network's own archival footage has begun leaking in bits and pieces, fueled by the nostalgia boom. A grainy reel surfaced at a vintage TV convention showing Grier rehearsing a scene that never aired. In it, she delivers a line so sharp and hilarious that whoever edited it simply cut it out of the final edit. Perhaps too dazzling to fit the intended tone. Fans cheered on social media when a 5-second clip dropped online, praising Grier's comedic prowess and reigniting debates about what might have been. Meanwhile, Grier herself has embraced the myth with characteristic grace. In interviews, she'll gently tease the long-standing rumors, her eyes twinkling as she says, "You know Hollywood, they need a good story, and this one stuck," but she rarely confirms or denies specifics. Instead, she pivots to championing up and coming writers and performers, emphasizing mentorship, script development, and the importance of trusting one's instincts. In doing so, she reframes the narrative. It never was about a leather jacket or a single line. It was about a career spent breaking barriers, one scene at a time. Looking back, it's easy to view that aborted sitcom cameo as a wound in Pam Grier's timeline. But from a broader perspective, it's a moment that encapsulates the complexities of 1990s television, a time when rising diversity clashed with entrenched systems. It reminds us that every decision to hold firm carries consequences, yet also forges a path forward. In recent years, the myth of Pam Grier's lone Fresh Prince appearance has resurfaced in surprising ways, popping up in podcasts, YouTube retrospectives, and even academic essays on television history. Scholars unpack the incident as a microcosm of late 20th century media politics, pointing to it as evidence that corporate sitcoms thrived on taming female power, even when flirting with its edge. One media studies paper dubs the moment the leather jacket affair, arguing that Grier's demand for a custom piece of wardrobe wasn't mere vanity, but a symbolic claim over her own image. The jacket became shorthand for the broader question: who controls the portrayal of a legend when she steps outside the confines of network expectation? Podcasters retell the scene by scene drama with near religious reverence, analyzing the unwritten beats of Grier's confrontation. They pause to speculate how a single line, tossed aside by nervous writers, could have rewritten Carlton's arc, softened NBC's image, and perhaps prevented the show's later critiques about stifling creativity. Clips of Pam's rehearsals, unearthed by diligent fans, reveal an actress effortlessly inhabiting every syllable, her measured pauses delivering more subtext than pages of rewritten banter. In these rare recordings, you hear her quietly insist on nuance, resisting the urge to let laughter drown out characterization. It's a masterclass in precise comedic timing, a reminder that behind every joke lies an actor's choice about what to reveal and what to withhold. Streaming platforms have their own take. One well-followed channel released a high-production mini-doc featuring interviews with former laugh track engineers and lighting techs. They recall how Grier's presence shifted the entire studio atmosphere. Electric, intense, almost reverential. One tech describes how the laughter that typically followed a punchline wouldn't come fast enough. Grier would punctuate the silence with a knowing smirk, daring the track operator to catch up. That playful power flip, they say, rattled network brass who'd never quite figured out how to manage an icon who refused to play along. Meanwhile, the TV industry itself hasn't forgotten the lesson. On panels at comic, con and television festivals, showrunners cite the Bel-Air clash as a cautionary tale. If you want your guest star to shine, give them the space to do it, reads one slide in a presentation by a hit Netflix comedy writer. They contrast that approach to the Fresh Prince debacle, where Grier was hemmed into a rigid script. Newer producers invite in depth collaboration, sometimes rewriting entire episodes around a guest's input. The shift toward actor-driven comedy is often traced back to that fateful 1994 session, an ironic legacy for the very moment Grier was shown the exit door. On social media, a thriving community of fan artists and meme makers has taken up the mantle. They post side-by-side art showing Grier in full 70s action regalia and tagged out behind laugh lines on a Bel-Air set, an image that went viral under the hashtag #WhereIsPam. Animated GIF edits play her clipped rehearsals in endless loops, set to dramatic scoring so that every eyebrow raise feels like a scene stealer. This digital folklore has propelled the story beyond old school TV Bibles into the hearts of Gen Z viewers who never watched a single original episode. For them, the Bel-Air saga is part of a larger reclamation project, celebrating the rule breakers who reshaped Hollywood's norms. Even the Banks family themselves have weighed in. In a recent reunion special streamed on Peacock, Alfonso Ribeiro, who played Carlton, told a different version of events. "I remember Pam walking in, and the whole crew stopped breathing. She brought this swagger that you couldn't script." His recounting is laced with admiration and regret, the kind of retrospective wistfulness that only comes when you realize the magnitude of a moment long past. Will Smith, in the same special, joked that he'd screwed up big time by not backing her creative requests. He admitted that at the time, as a rising young star, he never fully understood the stakes, but that hindsight has taught him how vital it is to stand with your co-stars when they challenge the norm. These stories coalesce into a modern moral. The world remembers bold choices, even when the decision costs you temporary glory. Pam Grier's choice to walk away from a high-profile TV cameo rather than compromise her artistic vision resonates powerfully in an era where social media calls out problematic moments and fans demand authenticity above all else. It's a parable for creators and audiences alike. The creative spark you nourish today can become the legend people parse tomorrow. Of course, not everyone agrees that Grier paid a price. Some critics argue that her vault of iconic roles remained untarnished, that Jackie Brown and Foxy Brown stand as testament to her enduring aura. But the Bel-Air incident persists because it taps into something universal, the tension between rebellion and acceptance, between the individual's voice and the collective machinery of entertainment commerce. It reminds us that every choice to assert creativity carries both risk and reward. Sometimes the reward is measured in cultural currency rather than network credit. Ultimately, the story of Pam Grier and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is more than Hollywood gossip. It's a blueprint for understanding how media industries negotiate power with the most powerful figures they claim to elevate. It underscores the paradox of celebrity. You attain iconic status by playing roles that define you, yet remain vulnerable the moment you insist on redefining those roles yourself. And for every fan who ever wondered why Pam Grier never returned to Bel-Air, the answer is both simple and profound. She valued her integrity over a fleeting laugh, and in doing so,